Hi, and welcome to the 2017 CPA Exam Changes Overview video. I'm Patrick, and this is Duke.
Hello.
And we are talking with our CPA expert from Surgent, Liz Kolar. Now, Liz, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Patrick and Duke. Hi, everybody. My name is Liz Kolar. I've been preparing candidates for the CPA exam for over 25 years. It's been my life. On the side, I also teach at a local university in town where I live. I'm excited to share some new information about the exam with you all, and look forward to speaking with you two as well, Patrick and Duke. So let's get started.
Yeah, let's hop right in. All right, so there's a lot of changes on the new exam, but everyone's wondering, okay, I have all this information. In what order should I take the exam?
Well, Patrick, that's a really good question. The examiners have recommended that candidates start with the financial accounting and reporting section. So I'll give you a reason why. I'll tell you why that's the case. The Board of Examiners have announced that they plan to integrate content across all 4 sections of the exam in one of the new enhanced simulations they're adding to the CPA exam. And they feel as if, since FAR is the foundation of accounting, it's like everything you learn as an accounting student, you learn and it's tested in FAR, that content will most likely be content that could show up in the other sections. Also, FAR tends to be the part that candidates say is their toughest part because it does contain so much information. And I feel like when you start out studying for the CPA exam, you're motivated. You know, you're excited, if that's possible. But you know, you want to be a CPA. So when you're starting, you're fresh. And I recommend at that point you should be tackling the hardest part. If you pass FAR, that is just going to increase your motivation. You know you've got the hardest part out of the way, and you're facing a downward sloping hill. If you start with, let's say, BEC, which many candidates have said it's the easiest part, you know, you're then facing an upward battle, and by the end of the process, I will tell you most likely your motivation is much lower. You're sick of studying by the time you get to, you know, the 9 months or year that it takes you to pass all 4 parts. And at that point, do you want to be facing the hardest part? You know, personally, I would say no. So for the reasons that the board has decided they're going to integrate content, and FAR is most likely the part that's going to be integrated, FAR is the toughest. You know, get it over with as fast as you can. You got to be mindful, too, that there is an 18-month clock, that once you pass your first part, you have 18 months to pass the remaining sections. And if you pass an easier section, your 18-month clock will start. And if you can't pass FAR at the end, it's the hardest part, you'll start losing credit for the parts you passed. So FAR first. Now, FAR contains everything related to accounting. So it's all your financial accounting that you learned in intermediate 1, 2, possibly if you had intermediate 3. It's got advanced accounting, not-for-profit accounting, governmental accounting. Now, Surgent does recommend the most study time for this part. Our candidates average about 105 study hours using our adaptive technology. I recommend candidates shoot for audit next, and the reason I do recommend that you go for audit right after FAR is because the examiners ask a lot of questions about accounting on the audit exam. You know, as an auditor, you're supposed to know whether or not the financials are presented in conformity with GAAP or another basis of accounting. And so the examiners are asking questions on bonds and questions on accounts receivable and deferred taxes. All that is the stuff that you would have learned if you studied for FAR first. So they expect you on the exam to be able to prepare work papers, for example, and that may be a bank reconciliation. You're going to learn that in FAR. So if you go for audit right after you've studied for FAR, you're going to remember all that material. It's going to make it much easier. In addition, audit, you know, is a part that candidates usually take closer to their college graduation. So if you're a recent college grad, you've probably had auditing in the last few months, and it's pretty fresh in your mind. So go for it right out of college before any changes are made to the content. The audit exam tests every step, every process in an audit, and also tests reviews and compilations, other types of engagements like attestation engagements, and also professional ethics. So there's a lot of content there. Our candidates average about 85 hours of study time to prepare for the audit section. The reg section is a unique part. You know, you think about what's on reg, it's pretty much tax, everything about tax, and a little bit of law and some ethics. The greater focus by far is on taxation, and that includes taxation of entities, taxation of property, taxation of individuals, business law. You know, unfortunately, the topic of business law is a really big topic. There's a lot of material, but it's not heavily tested on the exam. And why do I say it's unfortunately? Because the examiners don't narrow down, you know, what they're going to ask. So as a candidate, you pretty much need to know a lot of theory for just a few questions. And I feel bad for candidates for that reason. Ethics is a smaller portion as well, and it's ethics really as it relates to tax professionals. You can see here that the average study time for Surgent candidates is 90 hours, a little bit less than FAR, a little bit more than audit. You know, if you're working in tax, that's clearly going to be an advantage to you in getting through this section. The BEC section is the part that I recommend you take last, and before the changes, everybody said BEC was the easiest. When the exam changed in April 2017, the examiners introduced simulations to the BEC section for the first time. So that's new, and you know, it's hard to say how candidates are going to feel about those sims. I will tell you that the topics are all over the place. You know, they test corporate governance, economics. Economics. Most candidates take economics in their freshman year of college. And so what are the chances you're going to remember what you learned as a freshman by the time you're a senior? You know, it's like slim to none. IT, finance, cost accounting, it's all over the place. It's, you know, your general business knowledge. Good portion of the exam will be multiple choice. You've got some sims. You've got written communication questions. The reason I recommend you take BEC last, though, is because of those written communication questions. There are 3 of them on the BEC section, and the topics of those written communication questions can come from any one of the 4 sections of the exam. So if you have already studied for FAR, audit, and reg, and on BEC you get a question from FAR, you'll be able to answer it because you've already studied for that section of the exam. So a lot of people don't know that. They think the topics of those written communication questions have to come from BEC. That's not the case. And so go for BEC last for that reason. All right, so that's my recommendation of the sequence. You guys have other questions for me?
No, that's a very good point about the BEC written section, though. Thank you for pointing that out. That's definitely something that not a lot of candidates know.
My pleasure.
So our next question, I guess, this is more geared for people in the very early stages of beginning to get prepared to take the CPA exam. And it's a complicated process. There's a lot involved. One of the things is, when can you take the CPA exam? This is going to be crucial for planning, especially how long you're going to study for each section. But so what are the windows of time that you can take it?
Sure. Well, you know, it's pretty easy to follow. The candidates can test in the first 2 months of every quarter. So in looking at this graphic here, you can see that the 3rd month of every quarter, March, June, September, and December, you can't test. Now, beginning in September of 2017, the board is going to extend those closed windows by 10 days. They did this prior to the April 2017 change, but for the first window, so April, May, the first window that the new exam was introduced, they decided to close the entire month of June. So if candidates wanted to sit in that first quarter, they had to sit by May 31st. But starting in July, candidates will be able to test through the 10th day of every closed month. So that's really good news. It gives candidates extra study time, extra testing time, so hopefully giving them some more flexibility. I don't have any idea if they're going to extend those days. There was hope that they would open the closed months even more, and so we'll keep an eye on that. Hopefully they'll announce that. That would be even better for candidates to have more flexibility. The great news here is that you can test in most testing facilities, Monday through Saturday, multiple times during the day. So I recommend that you as a candidate plot out, how much time you want to study, what months you want to take the exam. So for example, if you're a May college grad, you're just beginning this process, you want to start studying in June, study the month of June and take your first part in July. And then July into August, study for your second part. Take it at the, by the end of the 10th day of September. And then in October, you study for your third part, take it at the end of October. And then in November, you study for your fourth part, take it before December 10th. So what I'm suggesting is a 6-month study plan. You got 4 parts, you study 4 months. You take a part in July, August, October, and November. You'll have all 4 parts done before you start your first busy season if you're a new college grad. And I have to tell you, if you can commit to that plan, you will be the happiest person on the planet. Can you imagine, starting your job and being done with the CPA exam by, let's say, Thanksgiving? That would be awesome.
I'm sure a lot of people imagine that, but don't actually get to that point.
I know, and it sounds aggressive. You don't necessarily have to be that aggressive about it, but I know a lot of companies out there will give pretty nice bonuses if candidates pass the exam within the first year. So if a 6-month study plan sounds too aggressive, here's another option. Do a part a quarter. So take 1 part in quarter 3 if you've just graduated from college. Let's say you've graduated May, and then do another part in the next quarter, and then spread the other 2 parts over the next 2 quarters. So you're basically covering all 4 parts within a year. That's very manageable. And even with that, you can still have a life. You can balance, school and studying and fun. You do have 18 months, but I'm not a fan. I'm totally not a fan of extending it into 18 months, because what happens if you don't pass? You lose credit. And I'm sorry, if let's say I started with FAR and then lost FAR because I didn't pass everything within 18 months, I don't know if I'd want to start over. I don't know.
It's a depressing thing that happens to some people. You see it in the forums. They're just like, oh my gosh.
Seriously. That is really discouraging. So I always tell candidates the worst case scenario is a year. Don't even think about the fact that you have an additional 6 months. Don't plan for that. That should not be there in your planning. That is a total tragedy backup plan if you need it. Let's go for this 6 months, year, get it done, and move on with your life.
That is solid advice.
Okay, so I'm the CPA exam candidate. I'm ready to take the test, but I'm wondering, what is the format of the test? I know that it's changed. I've heard that it's changed, but I know the very basic details, but I'm sure you know much more than the basic details, Liz.
Well, I have pretty significant details, and even up until a month before the exam changed, the board was coming out with slight tweaks. So honestly, it was making CPA review providers a bit crazy, because we wanted our software and our practice exams to totally simulate what candidates were going to see. So what we have here is the most up-to-date format that candidates will see if they take the exam in 2017. There are 4 sections: FAR, Audit, Reg, and Bec. Each section is 4 hours long. Each section contains 5 testlets. Now, there used to be 4 testlets, so now there are 5 testlets. The FAR exam, there will be 2 testlets containing 33 multiple choice questions in each. there will be a testlet that contains 2 task-based simulations, and then another 2 testlets after a 15-minute break that contain 3 task-based simulations in each one of those testlets. FAR has now fewer multiple choice questions than it did in the past, and it has 1 additional sim than it did in the past. So that's where the shift has taken place. Audit, also we see 2 multiple choice testlets. Fewer questions are asked in audit than in prior years. Same number of sims, 2, 3, and 3. Audit used to have 7 sims. Now you can see there are 8 sims, so they're adding an additional sim to the audit section of the exam. Reg, believe it or not, has more multiple choice questions than it did in the past, but Reg got the extra hour. Reg used to be only 3 hours, now it's 4, so you're getting an extra hour to handle 2 more multiple choice questions than they used to ask in the old format. And they've added 2 sims to the Reg portion of the exam. The BEC section is the part that has changed the most. There are fewer multiple choice questions asked in BEC, only 31 in each of the first 2 testlets. There are 4 task-based sims asked in the BEC section, and then your final testlet will contain the 3 written communication questions. So that's the breakout. Now, the problem with this as a candidate is knowing, your time strategy. Where should you be as you progress through this exam? So one of the gifts they're giving you with this new format is a standard 15-minute break, which won't count against your clock. So after your first testlet that contains the simulations, the 2 sims, you will be given the opportunity to take a 15-minute break, and it won't count against your clock. I think that's awesome. It gives you a chance to step out of the room, stretch your legs, shake off the nerves, just give your brain a chance to just take a break. But that break also should help you identify if you're keeping up with your time strategy. So what I'm about to say is extremely important. When you begin that 15-minute break, you should be at the 2-hour mark on your exam. You should be halfway through. That is so important. If you are 2.5 hours and you get to that break, I'm concerned that you're not going to be able to finish that exam. If you are an hour and a half and you get to the break, I'm really confident that you're going to have enough time to finish the exam. So that break should give candidates a real good sense of, are they on track to finish that exam? And if there's one thing I've heard from candidates, is they're having a hard time managing this. Because with the old format, when you got to your last testlet, you got to see all the sims. You knew what was coming. With this new format, you don't know what the sims are down the line. You can only see the 2 sims that you're in testlet 3. You don't know what is going to be in testlet 4 and testlet 5. There could be some really hard things waiting for you at the end of that exam. So timing is really, really, really important. Now, you can also take an optional break in between the testlets, but those will count against your clock. So the clock does not pause. So at the end of your first testlet, if you feel like you need to take a break, you can, but that'll count against your clock. And I'm recommending that you don't do that unless you really need to. If for some reason you need to take a break, absolutely take it, but try to avoid taking a break in between the testlets other than the 15-minute break that you're getting that's standardized.
Would you say that's good advice too, even like say for BEC when you're going to switch from the TBSs to the written communications, just because it's a significant format change?
Yeah, absolutely. The BEC topic, the BEC topics that are tested, some of them lend themselves to task-based simulations. And so this is my gut speaking. This is not, I don't know exactly what the AI CPA is asking, they do release questions to CPA review providers once they retire them. And we don't have those retired questions yet because it's new. So just because I've been in this business for 25 years, I've been teaching and preparing candidates for so long, I can share with you just my own insights. I think the areas in cost accounting, for example, represent great topics for a simulation. So variance analysis or break-even analysis. Finance, another perfect area to ask the simulation. So like ratio analysis, interpreting ratios, or, capital budgeting questions. And, that if a candidate is saying, what should I focus on when I'm studying, those would be like the mathematical meaty topics that I think you should be studying if you're worried about the BEC simulations. Timing strategy is still the same. You should be at the 2-hour mark. If you need to take a break after any other optional, take the break. The written communications, just so you all know, the AI CPA does put pre-test questions on every exam. And even though there are 3 written communication questions, one of them is a pre-test question and it doesn't count. So unfortunately, you don't know that. You won't know which one counts, which one doesn't. So you have to answer all questions as if they are going to be graded. But the focus on those written communication questions should be on your writing skills. They look at grammar, organization, clarity, conciseness, punctuation, spelling, things like that. So candidates shouldn't get too worried about those written communication questions.
Yeah, no, that's once again, Liz, you are the expert here. This is all great. So you kind of dove into the BEC a little more in terms of the structure of the written communication part. For the weight of the rest of the exam, that's something that's changed. It's gone from 60-40 for 3 of them to now it's 50-50. Can you explain kind of why that happened and what the actual breakdown is now?
Absolutely. So you are correct. It's now 50-50. It used to be 60% multiple choice, 40% sims. The driving force behind the exam change was the examiners felt that there was a disconnect between what the exam was testing and how it was testing versus what candidates were really doing on the job. And so they wanted to get away from this focus on memorization, which the exam really has focused on for decades. It's memorization and kind of regurgitation. And they want to focus more on application and analysis. And the way you can do that in their minds is through the task-based sims. Multiple choice tends to be more basic stuff, more remembering, more understanding. But in the sims, it can be more of a case approach where they can ask you to analyze, interpret, evaluate things. So they're going for the testing of the higher order skills. So that's why we see the shift more towards the weighting of the simulations and the introduction of the new sims in all 4 sections of the exam. Now, candidates are, moaning about this. Everybody likes the fact that, multiple choice, there are 4 choices. I can guess. If I don't know what the answer is, I can always guess. And that's true. But I will also say that's it's the same case for the task-based sims. You can guess. A lot of them are objective in design. They give you options to choose from answers. So if you're not sure, you can guess. You can also get partial credit in the sim. You can't get partial credit in the multiple choice questions. So I actually think the shift of the weighting on the task-based sims as being higher is actually good for candidates. I really do. Now, in BEC, it used to be 85% of the points came from multiple choice. So now you can see that the multiple choice are only worth 50%, and the task-based sims are going to be worth 35%. The written communication, the 3 questions are worth 15%, and that percentage didn't change. So what they did was they obviously took more points away from the multiple choice and are shifting it to the task-based sims. But again, I think task-based sims, you have the option of guessing, you have the option of getting partial credit. So I actually think this is good for candidates. I really do. I don't think it's a bad thing at all.
Okay. Well, I'm sure the candidates will be glad to hear that. You know, any good news is great with regard to these changes.
One of the other changes, though, is, and we've gotten a lot of people that have been kind of concerned about this. This is one of the things that they're hesitant to, get a review course and start studying, is the release timeline. So that's been changed, especially for the first part. Can you speak to that a little bit and kind of assuage some fears?
Absolutely. So there are major changes that have been introduced in the new format, and the examiners want to hold on. They want to look at how the country does, how candidates perform across the country in the first testing quarter here that they've introduced the new exam. So from April to May 31st, well, here's their plan. They're going to grade all the papers all at once and see how the country does as a total, and then release the scores. So in the past, it was a rolling point. You took your exam, and in 3 weeks you got your score. But you can see here, if you take the exam, if you've taken it in this first quarter, the new exam, first quarter meaning quarter two, you're not going to get your scores back until August 17th if you're taking FAR audit and reg, and August 21st if it's BEC. So that is a significant delay. But that's the reason. The examiners want to see how they do, because there may be an evaluation that needs to take place on the examiner's part in terms of what's the appropriate cut point. They use a scaled scoring system, and they want to make sure they're fair in that scaled scoring system. So they want to hold on to everybody's papers. So one question I get is, I'm on my last part, and because of this delay, I'm not going to get my results, and my 18-month window is going to be up. How is that going to affect me? I hear that a lot from candidates. Most of the state boards are accommodating candidates in those circumstances. So the advice I'd give to anybody is, if you are in that boat, you're taking your last part, but when you finally get your score, you're going to be outside of your 18-month window. Please contact your state board directly and hear from them what their policy is on that. That from what I'm hearing, they are willing to work with candidates because of this delay. The delayed score release will continue throughout 2017. The goal eventually is to get back to where we were prior to the change. So to have pretty quick score releases, and the hope is they hope to get back to that in 2018. So through quarter three and quarter four, you're going to see this delayed score release timeline. I don't think this should affect anybody's decision to take the exam. If you're in the market to take the CPA exam, take it. If you pass the exam, it's going to change your life. You're going to get a raise, you're going to get a bonus. If you're not happy in the current job that you're in, you can get a better one. They did studies, and I don't know, a lot of people don't realize this, but they've done studies on, age, how age affects your score and how long it takes to pass the exam. And they found that kids right out of college, so 22, let's say 22 years old, if they take the exam right out of college, have, let's say, an average pass rate of about 75%, which, if you know anything about the national pass rates, it's usually in the 40s. And it takes them about 140 days to pass all four parts. If you go 1 year later, the pass rates drop to like 60%, and the number of days it takes to pass almost doubles. So it makes total sense to me. I mean, I kid around with my college students all the time. I will teach them something, give them a test, and then the next week I'll ask them about something that was on the test, and they forgot it already. You know, it's like, you know, what happened in the week? You know, I just taught you this stuff. And you think about the CPA exam, it's really an exam that tests your knowledge from college. And the longer you wait to take it, the harder it is to remember that stuff. So don't postpone taking the exam in fear of, you know, delayed scoring or that it's going to be harder. You know, just take the test and pass it and move on with your lives. It's something that, you know, I did while I was still in college, and it was one of the best decisions that I ever made. Once you pass it, you're done. You can rip up those books. You can, you know, not have to study a day in your life ever again. You'll feel really good about it, and it'll launch your career, and it'll change your life. It's well worth the commitment. So don't worry about the score release timeline. That's my advice.
Okay. So it sounds like we might have found something that millennials are actually better at, which is passing the CPA.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So here I am. I'm ready to take the exam. I've studied everything. I've learned everything. And now I'm just thinking about the logistics, one of which is the new welcome screens. I haven't heard anything about this. What do I need to know, and what could, you know, mess me up come exam day?
Well, this is pretty significant. Used to be when you went into your testing site, your exam was activated, and you had introductory screens. You had 10 minutes to get through the introductory screens and answer the first question within 10 minutes. With the new exam, you only have 5 minutes. So your first welcome screen, you have to complete it in 5 minutes. And if you don't, you're locked out of your exam and you failed. You have to come back and take the test another day and pay the fees. It's unbelievable. So on that welcome screen, it's very simple. You just need to verify your name, your photo, the exam section, all that information is correct. And you have to enter your 7-digit launch code that will be provided on your notice to schedule. So I just went into the AI CPA website and took an image of the screen here for you so you could see it. Now, I want to give some really good advice to candidates. The AI CPA has a wealth of information on their site about the exam. You can go and look through all of this information. It's at aicpa.org. I recommend all candidates, before they take their exam, to go to that site and look at the sample tests. You can see this for yourself. There should be no surprises when you walk in to that testing facility. So that is your first welcome screen. You're going to answer that in 5 minutes. Then they have 2 other screens that you also have to accept within 5 minutes, and these are the policy statement and confidentiality screens, and they look like this. And so you just click accept. You know, so if you know that this is what you need to do on your testing day, you could probably get through both of these screens, or all 3 of them actually, within 2 minutes. It shouldn't take you 10 minutes. But if you were unaware that there is a 5-minute limit, I do think candidates could get into that position where they get locked out. And I can't even imagine that. Can you imagine having paid for the exam, having studied for the exam, and getting locked out because you did not accept the confidential top? I can't even imagine that. So I'm trying to spread that word, really speaking on the top of the mountain, saying it as loudly as I can, so no one is surprised by that.
And don't forget to bring your notice to schedule.
Oh, absolutely. The other thing is, make sure your ID matches exactly the name on your notice to schedule. So if you bring in your driver's license and your driver's license has a middle initial, your application, your notice to schedule has to have the same middle initial. You can be rejected at the testing site for not having your photo ID match your notice to schedule information.
The devil is in the details.
Yes, absolutely.
So then can we also look at what the new break screens look like?
Yeah, because of these breaks are new, they've introduced new break screens, and that's something that I want to show you too. If you break at the optional, so in between the testlets, what's going to pop up at the end of your testlet is this screen where it's giving you the option to take a break. So you can either click take a break or you can say continue. Now, if you do take a break at one of these optional points, your clock will continue. The 15-minute standard break, where the clock pauses, you get the same break screen. You can take it or you can continue. So you don't have to take the 15-minute break. But what I recommend for candidates is if you do choose to take the 15-minute break, plan to get back into the testing facility maybe like at the 13-minute mark. Because when you get back, you're going to see a screen that is your countdown screen of how much time you have left on your 15-minute break. And then once you get back into it, you're going to click continue the exam, and you have to re-enter your launch code to reactivate the exam. So I don't want you to lose time. You know, if you, let's say you walk back in on the 15-minute, and then, you know, then you go through this process, you've lost a couple of minutes. Also know that if you don't come back within 15 minutes, your clock will automatically restart. So you'll have to go through these screens, but at the 15-minute mark, your clock is going to start ticking again. So be mindful of your break time, and you know, I recommend taking shorter than 15 minutes so you have enough time to make sure you get through the entire 4-hour exam.
No, that makes sense. You certainly don't want to fail because of some silly mistake like that.
Yeah.
Kind of in that same vein, the new warning screens, you know, we've heard some rumblings about these, and it's another thing you don't want to trip up because of. So can you just explain that to us quickly?
Absolutely. So when you get to the end of your testlet, you will get a screen, a warning screen, if you've skipped any multiple choice questions. And I think that's really great because you don't want to leave questions blank ever on the CPA exam. And here's why. It's a positively graded exam. It's not negatively graded. So in my personal opinion, I recommend candidates never skip a question, ever. If you don't know how to answer the question, just guess, but never leave it blank. I'd rather you come to the end of the testlet and have no skipped questions whatsoever. If you get to the screen and you see you have skipped questions, you know, you have to be careful here. How much time have you spent in that testlet? Multiple choice questions, you've got to get through them pretty quickly to make sure you have enough time to finish the sims. So, you know, just if you get to the end of your multiple choice and you see you've skipped, like in this example, by the way, I pulled this right off of the AICPA website. Here's an example. I skipped 3 questions, but I've already spent, you know, 45 minutes in a multiple choice testlet. I'm not going to recommend that you go back and answer those questions because you're going to run out of time. You're going to be able to finish. The other warning screen they introduced was if you decide that you are quitting the exam, so you are actually ending the exam. They're making it very obvious to a candidate now with this particular screens that you're exiting the exam. You're not submitting a testlet. There have been some rumblings in the past that candidates didn't clearly understand. They thought they might have been submitting a testlet, but they accidentally submitted the whole exam, and they didn't finish. They left questions unanswered. So the quit screens is to make sure that candidates don't mistakenly exit the test when they're thinking they're just submitting a testlet. So I think this is a really good thing for candidates to know about.
So that's another great piece of advice here, and you know, once again, we don't want to have anyone fail because of skipping questions or hitting the wrong button or, you know, running out of time because they're confused at that screen. So, you know, we have one last question for you today, and it's kind of the big one. You know, you've got all this knowledge, you kind of know exactly what the new exam is going to be. How do you prepare for it? You know, there's a lot of different theories out there, but no one has seen this or done this more than you, so let's hear it from the expert herself.
Okay. Well, yes, you're definitely asking me a very big question, and I recommend that candidates study obviously effectively, but also efficiently. And one of the biggest mistakes I see candidates make in their preparation is they overstudy. They just study too much stuff. You as a college grad, if you're sitting for the CPA exam, you have a degree, you already have a strong foundation of knowledge. You do not need to study everything in the same depth. What you need to study is what you do not know. And unfortunately, most candidates do not know what they don't know because they don't know it. They've never seen it. I mean, it's such an obvious statement, but it is so true. Now, why is that the case? College professors will say, I'm not teaching my students to prepare them for the CPA exam. I'm teaching them accounting. So they will not teach you everything that's on the CPA exam. They may not. And so you don't even know that the topics exist. So this is one of the reasons we created the technology at Surgent, was to figure out how to solve this problem. Most students study in what we call a linear fashion. They start with the first chapter, and they read the chapter, and they watch the video, and they do all the questions. And then they work their way through to the 20 chapters in the book, and by the end, you know, they've studied everything. And I am saying that that is the worst strategy for the CPA exam, but it's what most people do. The stuff in Chapter 1 usually is the easy stuff. The stuff in Chapter 20 is usually a lot harder than the stuff that was in Chapter 1. And probably the stuff that was in the first few chapters, you know anyway. So why waste time studying it? So what we designed with Surgent was this assessment where we figure out what you know and what you don't know. We give you a series of multiple choice questions from the actual CPA exam, and we will figure out what it is that you're strong in and where you're weak, and we will come up with a custom study plan for you that will guide you in the direction you need to go to study effectively and efficiently and to get through the exam as quickly as possible with a very good passing score. Now, passing is a 75, and I know a lot of people say, Liz, if I got a 76, I studied too hard. I understand that. You know, I get that, but I would say shoot for an 80, please. You know, give us a little cushion, you know, because the 75 is passing, but a 74 is failing. So, you know, figuring out what it is you do need to study and building your weaknesses into strength is how we at Surgent recommend you study. Now, in addition to that, just figuring out what you need to study, how you study is really dependent on how you learn. And so at Surgent, we have we offer you different tools. You know, one of the best ways for students to study is by doing multiple choice questions. And if you get a multiple choice question wrong, well, that means you don't know that topic. So then maybe you watch the short 5-minute video that teaches you what you need to know about that topic, or you read the paragraph in the book that talks about that question topic that you got wrong. I tell students, you know, I don't want you reading a book cover to cover because that's a waste of time. I'm an accounting professor, and I can't read accounting textbooks. I'm being brutally honest. Let's be honest. How many times have you read something that was really technical and boring? You maybe got through 2 or 3 pages of it, and then you realized you didn't comprehend a single word? Have you ever done that? All the time. And that's what happens here when you start reading too much material. So we have short video clips. And the average attention span of a typical CPA candidate is very short. It's less than 22 minutes, so none of our videos go over that time limit for a reason. You know, and our adaptive technology tells you exactly what you need to study. So I don't want you watching a 4-hour video that covers every aspect of bonds. I only want you watching the 10-minute video on the one bond topic that you don't know. That's where being efficient really matters. You also have to practice the simulations, and you don't want to jump too quickly into the sims when you're studying, because the sims cover often several topics. They're not just isolated on one topic. There are new sims on the exam that you have to be ready for. They are the document review sims and these comprehensive sims that they introduced. And the only way you're going to get ready is if you are exposed to them in your study process and you practice them. So, we introduced these new sims, the document review sims we had in our course last year, because they began testing them in July of 2016. The comprehensive sims we've had since the beginning of the year for our candidates, because we wanted our candidates to be exposed to the depth of those sims as early as possible. In terms of strategy, I think also this plays a major role for candidates. Depending on what part you're taking, if you look at this structure, you've got 33 multiple choice questions in the first testlet of FAR, 36 in audit. I want candidates to approach it pretty much this way. Know, number one, that there are pretest questions, that 15 to 20% of the questions don't count. So, as I said earlier, you won't know which questions count, which ones don't. But if you are, at any point in the exam, you get a question and you don't know how to answer it, what do? Well, don't leave it blank and don't skip it. My recommendation is guess as quickly as you can. Pick your favorite letter, A, B, C, D. What's your favorite choice? Just go into your test with B is my go-to letter. If I don't know an answer, I'm going to B and I'm letting go and I'm moving on to the next question, because if you want to finish this exam, you only have about a minute to a minute and a half to answer a multiple choice question. And if you read the question and you don't know how to answer it at all, pick B, move on, and let it go. Just don't leave it blank. Don't get caught up on it, because I know a lot of candidates get upset when they see a question they don't know how to answer it. You really do have to keep an eye on the clock. And I do think the trick to getting through this exam and finishing on time is getting through those multiple choice questions as quickly as you can without making silly mistakes. So you want to make sure you read every single word. Don't read too quickly, because you might miss key points of the question. But those first two testlets, you want to make sure you get through in the shortest amount of time possible. Now, when you get to the end of the testlet, let's say there are 33 multiple choice questions. You had planned that you were going to spend 40 minutes. If you get to the end of that question and you're at 32 minutes, you have time to go back to any skipped questions or flagged questions. But if you said I was only going to spend 40 minutes on that first testlet and I'm at 45 minutes, what do you think? I'm going to say submit that testlet, move on, don't go back. You don't have time. It's not worth it. Remembering that 15 to 20% of the questions don't count. And you could be harboring on a question that won't matter. The simulations are really where time management is going to be crucial. Because the sims are broken up across all three of the testlets, you as a candidate have to be able to identify the type of sim it is as soon as you see it and know how much time you can spend on that type of sim. And so I'm going to talk to you about this now. This is probably some of the most important advice I can give you. There are different types of sims on the exam, and they're not all the same. The first type of sim is what we call regular. It's a task-based sim. It's been asked for years. It's shorter in nature, so there's only usually a few questions asked. You can expect to see 2 or more of these types of sims in each of the 4 sections of the exam. And then if you see one of these short sims in your testlet, 12 minutes, that's all I want you to spend on it. 15 minutes max, and move on. Because these other sims you see here are going to show up, but they may show up in later testlets. The second one on my list here, this enhanced task-based sim, they're calling it, the examiners refer to it as just a task-based sim, but it's not a regular sim. It's a comprehensive sim that may contain content that's integrated from other sections. It's much more comprehensive in the design. It often contains documents that you have to look at and analyze, and it's taking candidates 20, 30, maybe even 40 minutes to solve. Now, I hope that you only get one of them, but it's possible you could get more than one of them. So if you're taking the exam, let's say you're taking FAR, and in your first testlet of SIMs, you didn't get one of these lengthy ones. What that means is one of the lengthy ones is either going to be sitting in the fourth or fifth testlet. So you have to make sure you have enough time in your bank to answer that question. Suppose it doesn't show up until the fifth testlet. You need to make sure you have 30 minutes left to handle that one question.
And Liz, you're definitely going to get one of these in the exam, right?
Yes. This is the new sim they added. This is the one that I said, they added a new sim. This is it. This is the one. And this is the one that they're really hoping will truly test candidates' ability to perform as a newly licensed CPA. This one shows that a candidate has the skills. So if you're reading any forums and you're hearing about people saying they ran out of time, it's because of this. They did not properly strategize. They didn't manage their time well. Now, if you have not practiced one of these sims and you get it on the exam, you're going to get clobbered because you don't know how to handle it. We have them in our software, and some of them contain like 10 different documents that you have to analyze, and the AI CPA will put distractors in there. So the questions contain documents that are relevant, some are not relevant. You got to kind of weed through all that information. And if you've never done one, you could get lost in this, and you could be an hour trying to solve it. It's so important that you practice these. And the same is true with the next one on the list. Although the document review simulation has been around since last year, many candidates haven't seen it. And I think it's a great question because it's very realistic. And, let's say you're doing an audit and you want to do a bank rec. Well, to do a bank rec, you need, the bank statements. You need the cash receipts journal. You need different documents, and you need to be able to look at the documents to be able to do the bank rec. The document review simulation has the bank rec say completed, and some of the sentences or some of the numbers are highlighted, and you have to determine based on the information they've provided in the problem whether the statements in the document are correct. And if they're not correct, well, how it should be changed. And it's a drop-down menu. You get different choices. So the best thing about the DRS is the answers are actually in the problem. You just need to find them. They're giving you the answers. They're in the documents. You just need to find it. But if you have not practiced this, if you've never seen it before, I can only imagine the panic you would feel. So if you're studying, no matter what provider you're using or how you're studying, you must have access, and you must be able to practice these. So you can see the DRS, I'm saying 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and preferably it's 15. I want you to have enough time to handle that whopper, that enhanced comprehensive task-based simulation that's going to show up somewhere in the 3 task-based simulation testlets. Now, there is also a research question that's been around forever, and the research question will be on FAR Audit and Reg. BEC does not have a research question. There is good news here. They've moved the authoritative literature tab in the exam to make it easily accessible. And the other bit of good news, too, is they're including all the authoritative literature in all the sections. So I'm going to give you a really important tip. let's say you're in a simulation question that's an integrated sim and has a question. Let's say you're in FAR, but the question has a tax component to it. Well, now you'll be able to research the authoritative literature, the IRS pubs, let's say, the Internal Revenue Code, to help you find the answer. So it's great that candidates will have access to all the authoritative literature in FAR, Audit, and Reg, no matter what section they're in. This question is relatively easy. You put in key search words and you find the code reference. You have to plug in the right numbers. You don't have to write anything about it. You just need to find it, search it, find it, and indicate you found it in the literature and what is the code reference. The warning I just give candidates, just watch for time. Don't spend more than 10 minutes on this because you could get lost in it. Clock just ticks, ticks, ticks. You keep searching. You can't find exactly the right perfect thing, and you begin to panic. You don't want to run out of time, so you got to keep moving. And then lastly, the written communication questions. 10, 15 minutes on 3 of them. Those will show up in the last testlet on BEC. So you don't have to worry about where they're going to pop up. They've told us that's where they're going to pop up. Hopefully you've given yourself enough time. 3 testlets, you've got to have at least a half an hour to get through all of those 3 questions at the end of the BEC exam. So yeah, that's my strategy for the Sims, and it is, I think, the most important thing that if you're listening to this interview today, that you take away the significance of practicing the Sims. You really got to do that.
No, that's super helpful, and it's something I think they're increasingly important and they're increasingly represented on the test. That's something that everyone needs to know. They're not 40% or less than that on the BEC, but now they're 50% on 3 of the sections, so that's important. Any kind of last little nuggets of wisdom you can give our future test takers?
Well, everybody who takes the CPA exam, they come out of it and say it's the hardest test they've ever taken. Everybody says that. I don't think I've ever heard somebody tell me, oh, it was easy. And I don't know why people do that, because, well, maybe I do. I mean, can you imagine if you came out and said, I thought it was easy, and then you got a 50? You got egg on your face. So, it is a challenging exam, for sure. And it has to be, because it's a very valuable credential. The Wall Street Journal says that the license itself is worth more than $1 million, compared, let's say, a CPA versus someone who doesn't. Your earnings potential is more than $1 million. You pass the CPA exam, you can wear that license with pride. I mean, that you worked hard to get that. It's so valuable. I tell students it's worth the effort. You got 4 exams. You need to study 4 months, and you can change your life forever. The CPA has opened up so many doors for me over my career that I don't think I would have had opened if it wasn't for the fact that I had that license. Once you pass it, they can't take it away from you. You'll always have it, and it's just so worth it. So, don't worry about what other people are saying. Yes, the exam has changed, but it's not going back. So we have to accept that reality. Just take the test, move on with your careers, and know that it's financially worth it. People ask me all the time, hey, what do you do for a living? And I say, I'm an accountant. And they say, oh, are you a CPA? And I say, yes. And then they say, oh, I heard that test was hard. You must be smart. And I'm like, oh. It's not necessarily that I'm smart. It's just, I studied. You have to study to pass the test. You have to make the commitment to study. And if you do, you'll pass. You will. Surgent guarantees it. We do. If you do what we tell you to do and don't pass, we'll refund your tuition to our course. We also, give you access to the course until you pass. And students get to talk to me personally. And I have a team of top executives who've been, we've got 60 years combined experience in the industry. And I want our students to talk to us personally because we do have the wisdom and we do have ways to help navigate the exam and keep you motivated. You know, I like to do check-ins with my students on a regular basis because I feel like if they know I'm checking in with them, they're more likely to stay up on their studies. You know, these are all things that are really important, and I want to help people pass and become part of this great profession. So that's my my little ending speech for you.
Well, Liz, it sounds perfect. And, you know, once again, thank you so much. It sounds like, you know, elbow grease and delayed gratification. Those are kind of the themes that you hit upon. And, you know, we're
Absolutely.
right there. So thank you so much. And we will be featuring Liz on further videos. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment below.
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate the time. And good luck to all of you studying for the exam.